I noticed recently that a lot of woke rhetoric has kind of been amping up, targeting their favourite enemy, of course, white people.
Hello.
Hello there, if you're watching. But yeah, I thought it'd be worthwhile to just go through all of these new developments and see the boundaries which they're trying to push, because not only is it very good to have it all together to say, okay, well, if people aren't discriminating against white people, explain the content of this video, which is part of the reason I'm doing this, but also the fact that things have become more and more explicit and people are more and more tolerant of this when they shouldn't be. So without going on for too long, let's have a look first at the United States. So this particular story is very egregious. It's a Minnesota public school changing its rules to lay off white teachers before minorities.
I had heard about this, yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how much more explicit you could get. Just like, yes, the colour of your skin depends on whether you have a job or not. I mean, we're back to pre-Jim Crow era.
Well, they did say they're going to do the Ibrahim X Kendi thing of trying to correct past discrimination with present discrimination. So that means
That makes
because
it better,
a bunch of unrelated people hated black people in the past, therefore we have to hate white people in the present.
Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it? So I'm going to read from this article a little bit. Minnesota Public Schools reached an agreement with its teachers' union to institute a policy that will discriminate against white teachers during layoffs, according to a report from Alpha News. The agreement, which the union reached in March following a 2-week strike, upends the seniority-based layoff system under which teachers who have been employed the least amount of time are the first to be fired. Under the new rules, if a minority teacher is set to be laid off, the district will instead fire the next least senior teacher who is white.
So the interceding identity is a criteria that supersedes meritocracy. So
Yes.
rather than the amount of time you spent being a teacher and giving the best education to kids, instead fired because white.
It's also weird that they're not just doing a sort of firing methodology of who is the worst teacher rather than who is the most recently hired, because that seems irrelevant. Maybe the most recent teacher is really good and the ones you already had before were bad.
But it seems
Doesn't
irrelevant
make
to
any
us.
sense.
However, if, for example, what they would say disproportionate number of black teachers turn out to be the less performing teachers, we would have no qualms about letting those teachers go because it's in the interest of the kids to get better education. But they're thinking in the racial paradigm. Therefore, they can't be seen to be firing black teachers because they would be upholding systemic racism.
That's exactly it. It must have been at some point they were firing too many black teachers and therefore they've got to have this clearly unmeritocratic racist policy to maintain them in the classrooms,
Yeah.
which isn't in anyone's interest really, except
Especially the black kids who are going to be learning under those said teachers and have worse off outcomes educationally anyway.
And I'm reading a direct quote here. If laying off a teacher who is a member of a population underrepresented among licensed teachers in the site, the district shall access the next least senior teacher who is not a member of an underrepresented population, reads the agreement, which goes into effect next spring. The justification of the racial discrimination is to remedy the continuing effect of past discrimination, as you alluded to. I mean, we don't really need to read it from their own words. We know exactly the rationale behind this, don't we?
Well, the continuing effects of past discrimination is the present discrimination. Just stop discriminating. But you don't care about discrimination. You're just racist.
Never mind the fact that at a psychological level, if you bring race to the forefront, there's something known as the cognitive recency effect, which things that you've come into recent contact with manifest in your mind more often. And this is why things like diversity training and unconscious bias training actually create more racism in people, because all they've done is bring all of these racial stereotypes to the forefront of people's minds, and therefore they can recall them more easily, and therefore they're actually turning out to be more racist.
Yeah, and the only person still clinging to the implicit association test being used for diversity training is Mazarin Banager, who's already turned around and said, yeah, I'm basically a Marxist. The rest of them said, because it's replicable, because you can basically get better at it by training your reaction time. You can't use it in this way, so abandon it. But it hasn't stopped multiple people making hundreds of thousands.
Well, it still
off the grid.
manifests in the UK government as well, because we supposedly banned all of this kind of training from the government because we saw it as a waste of money and obviously an infiltration of racial politics, but it still seems to be popping up in like an eternal game of civil service whack-a-mole. So, carrying on with the article, Minnesota Public Schools policy is the latest example of teachers' efforts to institute policies favouring minority teachers in hiring and compensation in order to achieve racial equity. Staff at New York City's elite Dalton School in 2020 demanded the administration pay off black faculty's student debt, and this is coming from the Washington Free Beacon. The Minnesota policy also favours minorities when the district reinstates teachers, and I quote directly here, "The district shall deprioritise the more senior teachers who is not a member of an underrepresented population in order to recall a teacher who is a member of a population underrepresented among licensed teachers."
So underrepresented in what context, though? Because obviously they're saying society-wide by pure population numbers, but if you're talking about power, all of a sudden, they've achieved their evil goal of creating a new aristocratic class based on skin colour. And so they're no longer underrepresented. So it's not about representation in the raw data sense. It's about, we want Gibbs. Gibbs, please.
But also the fact that representation as a word has been twisted to mean physical stuff rather than your representative representing your values, your beliefs.
Well, I've read enough German philosophy to feel no kinship with my continental European counterparts. This is a purely American import because, funnily enough, to all the Yanks out there, hello, you're welcome for creating the country.
You're going to know lots of Southerners.
Yeah, exactly.
Yanks.
Well, we're not quite the melting pot as your country is, and I don't feel much in common with the Dutch or with the French or the Germans because we have very different cultural differences. So the idea that we're just white and black homogeneities, alien concept to us.
World War II, good example. We kind of were at war with one another. But yes, it carries on to cite James Dickey, a senior trial counsel at the Upper Midwest Law Center, told Alpha News the policy is racial discriminatory and unconstitutional. The collective bargaining agreement openly discriminates against white teachers based only on the colour of their skin and not the seniority or merit. Dickey said, Minneapolis teachers and taxpayers who oppose government-sponsored racism like this should stand up against it. Absolutely. It's nice to see that people are actually pointing out, trying to do stuff about it for once. And of course, the fact that this has become international news hasn't stopped them from going ahead with it either. So Minneapolis School District defends deal with teachers union to lay off white staff ahead of people of colour because it will remedy the effects of past discrimination. So yes, they're comfortable enough that they're willing to defend it even when the UK press is picking up on the story, which you think for just a teachers union, you'd think that would be a lot of pressure to have the world's press. But no, they're confident enough that they're happy to go along with this.
Yeah, but they weren't even prosecuted for burning down buildings in 2020, so a little bit of bad press is nothing off their reputation.
I'm not entirely sure that was just the teachers' union, though. Maybe.
No, but it was supported in that exact city. So the Overton window shifted so far that now property damage, crystal nut style, essentially, for racial injustice, has become the new standard. And so if that's the new bar to clear, then a little bit of, we'll sack white people just because we don't like them, that's perfectly acceptable in the progressive paradigm.
So if you want to understand the progressive paradigm, Carl has done an entire series explaining critical race theory on the website. So that's certainly worthwhile checking out if you want to understand the academic rationale behind these beliefs that we seem to see coming into fruition in society far more often.
It's trickle-down black supremacy.
Yes. So, as if that isn't bad enough, this next story from Fox News, white people banned from off-campus UC Berkeley student housing common areas. So a private housing co-op just off of the University of California Berkeley campus has banned white visitors in common areas, all without consent from other tenants. The Person of Colour Theme House is a housing co-op located near UC Berkeley that aims to provide housing to low-income, first-generation, immigrant and marginalised students of colour, according to its website. It is a private venture and not affiliated with the university, but of course it's part of the university culture, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
in that it's symbolic of the kinds of people that are attending that university.
So I don't know what the progress is on the laws, but I even in private companies, I would have thought that civil rights legislation would have stopped you from doing this kind.
Yeah.
But I know California has attempted to overturn existing civil rights legislation in order to do affirmative action. So I wonder if this is standing because it's not federally funded, even though it's federally associated with the university, and because California was successful in overturning their civil rights legislation and doing the same instrument that was done 60 odd years ago to black people, now to white people.
It says, in a leaked photo of the house rules for the co-op. Tenants are instructed not to bring white guests to the home without permission and to keep the white guests from the common areas.
Have you noticed white is capitalised there? They've started doing it as well.
Oh, great.
So capital B black, pretending there's some sort of black international nation inside the United States. Now the parallel has happened, and so we're seeing the sides in the emerging race war ossify. A race war which we don't want to fight, by the way, because congratulations. Again, I don't feel any kinship with fully white people.
Many, this is a direct quote, many POC members moved here to be able to avoid white violence and presence. So respect their decision of avoidance if you bring white guests, the leaked house rule list states. I mean, that's pretty.
But they've not even
stuff.
capitalised white in there. That's Fox News that have done that. This is the press.
White people are not entirely banned from the house's premises, but those wishing to bring white guests into the building must alert other tenants. Always announce guests in the guest chat if they will be in common spaces with you, and if they are white, one rule states.
Treat them like pets.
I know, it's really weird.
Yeah, sign your dog off if you're bringing it into the halls.
Mm-hmm. So yes, it's also worth mentioning this next Daily Mail article. Someone who lived in this building described the student house as a nest of vipers where members accuse each other of white supremacy for being white.
Progressive cannibalism. How fun. Please eat your own.
And clearly this white supremacist that's outed them by the name of Mandahai Batar, I mean, his word can't be trusted, can it?
Yeah, that's in the original German dialect, I assume.
So yeah, there are also outlets like Bloomberg whinging that white people get bigger share of monkeypox shots, early data shows, and this is now becoming some sort of weird rallying point for them.
Yeah.
So it reads.
I was going to say, when I spoke about progressive cannibalism, the gays already had their cannibal in Jeffrey Dahmer, so it's nice to see them now fractionating down to the different identities of cannibal.
Much like with COVID-19, the monkeypox health crisis in the US is hitting black and Hispanic Americans hard. Is there a double entendre there? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yet those groups are so far lagging in vaccination rates, early data obtained by Bloomberg News shows. Oh, vaccine skeptics are they? Don't let YouTube know. The US, which last Thursday declared monkeypox a public health emergency, is the epicenter of the global outbreak. The majority of cases, so far have been concentrated among men who have recently had sex with other men.
And goggled piss in San Francisco.
So you just mean gay men then?
Yeah.
Demographic data from the US. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say there are 9 children that have contracted it.
Oh dear, yeah, I heard about one in Texas. That's slightly worrying. I hope the people involved in that have been arrested.
I'm sure it's just general skin-to-skin contact, Josh.
Of course.
Yeah.
What am I saying? Oh, yeah. It's definitely not largely transmitted a different way, is it?
ABC News literally said it's a sexually transmitted disease in an article the other day.
It is, though, isn't it?
Oh, God.
Demographic data from the US Centers of Disease Control, though incomplete, suggests that most cases are among people of colour. As the end of July, black people make up 26% of cases with known race and ethnicity information, and Hispanic people make up 32% of all cases.
Did you see the New York vaccination centre for monkeypox where they were queuing around the block and it was just all white dudes in booty shorts?
So apparently gay men, they've got their stuff together, apparently,
Oh.
if they're white.
Wonderful.
They know what they're doing. Then
Oh, who?
they're not averse to having a needle stuck in their arse. Anyway, so here's something from Harvard Business Review, which I just thought was too egregious not to mention. This is from a few days ago. Research. People can learn to recognise their racial privilege, and it starts with structural racism is a reality in the American workplace.
Nope.
No citation.
Yep.
Just yes, this is what we do.
Well, it might be in
Harvard.
yours, in which place everyone should quit.
Yeah. Studies have shown that all else being equal, white employees are more likely than their non-white peers to receive callbacks for job interviews, are less likely to be blamed for poor performance, earn significantly higher wages, and advance faster. But despite this substantial body of research, many white Americans continue to deny that they may benefit from racial privilege in work settings. In fact, in a 2021 survey found that nearly half of white people in the US believe... sorry, my notes have just popped up. Half of white people in the US believe that they are discriminated against, not privileged due to their race.
I mean, for the first half of that paragraph, I was getting worried that they were going to start mentioning bell curves for a minute there, because that sounds just incredibly like the soft bigotry of low expectations for black employees. But then the latter half, it's like, okay, if they're going to end this by saying we should have preferential hiring policies, aren't they? So yeah, you are discriminating against us because of our race. And I don't want to have to say us either, because again, we don't feel any kinship with all white people globally. We're not some ummah.
Yeah, you hear an English person talking about the French or the Germans. There's no
Exactly.
kinship there.
That's the fun part. We enjoy that. Don't take it away from us.
I mean, even in Britain, like if you're from a neighbouring city, that's almost
The
too
north
many
and the
degrees
south.
of
Don't-
separation.
Yeah, don't try and talk about racial kinship with a Scouser and a Londoner, because they're just going to say justice for the 97.
Well, you don't speak to a Scouser or a Londoner, or they might stab you. That's the trick. So yes, it's also worth mentioning that they say all else being equal, as if that's ever possible. Like you can just isolate all variables. And yeah, this is a perfect study where we've just got it all controlled. The only thing we're looking at is race.
Yeah.
And from a research perspective, that's madness that you can do that. That's
Well,
such
that
a difficult thing to do.
It underwrites their own claim of intersectionality, that there are interlacing layers of oppression. Therefore, how are you not accounting for it? It's all just nonsense.
So it's also worth mentioning that Friends actress defends show from too many white people outrage. So Marta Kaufman, the creator of the television show Friends, continues to apologise to the casting police for scripting a show with 6 white heterosexual lead characters. Kaufman even pledged to donate $4 million to fund African and African American studies at Brandeis University to compensate for not employing enough diverse performers 25 years ago.
She also grovelled about the fact that Chandler's dad used he pronouns despite being transsexual. And it's like, okay, now you're retroactively assuming his pronouns. Is that not transphobic?
Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe in the show, has a different perspective on the matter. Kudrow says the show's writers had no business writing from the point of view of people of colour, which
God,
is
it's still a
even
progressive
worse
paradigm.
before. There are like several layers
I
of
can't think like a
nonsense.
black. It's a what? Sorry, what? Like, I had this in university when women were saying, oh, men can't write about women. And I said, well, no, you can, because, yeah, there's differing perspectives. You can see that in, the agreeableness data from the Scandinavian countries, for example. But unless you're writing about a biological process, you can still, quote, write what you know. And then that comes back to the great Jack Nicholson quote, because from, I can't remember which film, where he's playing an author, and some woman runs up to him saying she's a big fan of his books. And she goes, sir, how did you write such great women? And he said, easily, I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability, and then shuts the elevator doors.
But anyway, moving on to the UK, we're not exactly leaving the Americans with all the fun. We've got our own racism going on as well. And here is an interesting study that came out where it's looking at the portrayal of black people in UK television advertising, the perception and reality, and I'm quoting from the abstract here, using interviews with advertising professionals and focus groups with black consumers, information on the perceptions of black people in advertising was gathered. The overwhelming message to advertisers was a simple one. It isn't about quotas, it's about the way we are portrayed. I'm not sure about that. A content analysis of all advertisements shown during prime time on free terrestrial channels over 2 weeks was then conducted. Results revealed that black people are actually overrepresented in the UK television advertisements, although this is not the case for all sectors.
So
I mean,
this-
I could have told you that.
Yeah,
but-
this study was 16 years ago as well, so it's gotten, the word not to use is worse, but more evident that every single family is mixed race in an advert, and it's because individually each company has a diversity quota for their adverts, and so when you aggregate them all together in a 5-minute ad block, it just looks like a different country entirely. And that's not to say that mixed race relationships are bad, it's to say it's not what my eyeballs are telling me when I step out the door. And again, as a Londoner, I live in the most racially diverse part of the country, and even then, not every black bloke is married to a white bloke and vice versa. I said 2 men there, but that's also accurate.
That does happen on the TV, I'm
Yeah,
afraid.
there's a sofa advert where they're both curling up, and there's one of them in bed, and I'm just like, well, okay, why do I need to see this? Just show me beds. I'll choose whether I want to buy it or not. It actually makes me want to buy it less, thinking there might be 2 men coming home in it.
So it's also worth mentioning this next part here, where here are many prominent European figures in history portrayed by sub-Saharan Africans. So yes, we've got Sir Lancelot, of course,
Where's Anne Boleyn
Julius
as well?
Caesar.
She was on there.
She didn't make the list, apparently. There are too many to...
Oh, there's the old joke about if there's a redhead in Hollywood, it will be swapped to a black person. And then someone made a meme making fun of Hollywood of a ginger character running away from a Hollywood producer, and it's a dyslexic Hollywood producer, because if you swap the letters around, it makes something terrible.
Oh, right.
Yes,
It took
which
me
we
a
do
while.
not avow, because Hollywood is racist, not us.
So it's also worth mentioning, I know we've covered this before, but the stuff to do with the women's football was pretty explicit as well.
Yeah.
England women are superb, but they are all white. Why? And should this be fixed?
What are you going to do? Kneecap the footballers?
They're going to have to play in blackface, I'm afraid. So yeah, it's also worth mentioning that when the England men's team gets to the World Cup final,
Yep.
and the 3 black players miss their penalties, it's not about race.
No.
It was really great, but when they actually win, all of a sudden race.
Well, diversity
back on
was
the
our
cards.
strength until we lost.
Well, in that case, diversity was our weakness because they all missed their penalties.
Well, no, maybe we weren't diverse enough because, of course, we lost to the Italians and they're not white.
I disagree with that. Surely there must be. I mean, I don't believe in race at all, really.
No, but it's the old
silly
joke about the
concept.
Sicilians of there's a black man hiding behind your woodshed in your ancestry somewhere. But of course, if we're going to go by the American conception, Italians were excluded from whiteness years ago when they showed up on Ellis Island. So, well done to the black team for winning the Euros, I suppose.
So there's also another article demonstrating the very same from, surprise, surprise, The Guardian. England
Yeah.
women's all-white starting 11 shines the light on a deep-rooted problem, should I say. So yes, there's also another article here from The Independent. If Owami Davis were white, her disappearance would cause more concern. I mean, really? Do you think that people aren't concerned about disappearing people?
Well,
And then it talks about Sarah Everard, but that was just an
That was 'cause
absurd
it was
level of
police officer.
attention, and it was a police
yeah,
officer.
that's why it was an institutional failing, and that is an actual example of institutional corruption because other police officers covered for him. But here, sorry, as a general member of the public, even someone plugged into the news cycle, I can't remember the name of every tragically missing woman. You know, it's people only have so much limited attention. It's not race; it's just time.
Here is the conversation saying, whiteness is at the heart of racism in Britain, so why is it portrayed as a black problem? I mean, do you really want my answer to that?
Whiteness wasn't a concept progenited in Britain. Again, we have differences from our European neighbours, so it's not whiteness. It's, you know, we just say we're English, and there's such a thing as Black British as well. We're happy to incorporate you if you're second generation. You grew up here. Just do as the Romans do and participate in British culture. You know, go to Greg's, drink in a spoons, complain about the weather.
So it's also worth pointing out this meme that I thought was particularly good, is that, yes, white lives matter, black lives matter, sorry, okay. Jewish lives matter, okay. Asian lives matter, okay. White lives matter has been declared a hate group. I mean, I have no problem with saying people's lives matter, no matter who they are, but the fact that there's this weird double standard where one's a hate group, one is celebrated, I mean, could it get more juxtaposed?
The mask-off moment about raw power was when people kept coming out and saying all lives matter is racist. And there is a video of a guy who walks up to neighborhoods, urban neighborhoods in America, with a cardboard cutout sign just saying all lives matter, standing on a street corner, nothing to do with the protest and that. And there are just inner city black gentlemen who will run up to him and just start hitting him. And
That sounds about right, yeah.
the statement is nothing egregious, it's non-objectionable, but just because they have been programmed by media to believe that stating everyone's has innate equal moral worth is somehow saying black people don't have moral agency or matter, they just run after him and start hitting on him.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's awful. So something that I think has gone by the wayside, but our very own John Wheatley has pointed out to me, is that there's a new University Challenge host, Amal Rajan, to replace Paxman,
Yeah, Jeremy Paxman.
who is the grumpiest human being I have ever had the displeasure of watching. So he was actually on University Challenge, a celebrity version, and he was asked the question, and I quote directly here, what name is given to the principle that in every hierarchy each individual is promoted until they reach the level of their incompetence? And Amal buzzed in early for this question and got it wrong. And what it is a meritocracy. So no wonder he got it wrong, because he's probably not come into contact with it before, has he? So there's also another insufferable article from The Guardian saying the phrase white working class is a fiction, so why are the Tories obsessed with it? And the byline says, working class people are more diverse than any other social group, so why is the right so obsessed with peddling a fake narrative that it's white people who have been left behind?
Because poor immigrant people in this country often self-segregate. I mean, look at the satellite states of Pakistanis, for example, in Bradford and Telford, etc. So that means just by nature of England being natively Caucasian, you're going to have neighbourhoods which are majority white which aren't very well off. Therefore, white
Well,
working
there's
class.
also the fact that they have all the disadvantages of other groups, but also they have the state actively discriminating against them.
Yeah, in
So
recent
they've got
years.
the hardest time of all. It's why white working class boys seem to do the worst out of any demographic group in a number of different metrics. It's because they're both male and they're white and working class. So they've got perfect trifecta of disadvantage there that is being ignored or actively encouraged in some
Intersectional,
cases.
you might say.
You could say that, yeah. So some more general stuff is an Australian Access has claimed that you should never wear feathers as accessories to music festivals because it is wrong and harmful.
Oh, is this going to be about the
Well,
indigenous in Australia?
Natalie, who is of Peruvian and Argentinian descent
God
and
almighty.
identifies as an indigenous woman, shared a lengthy Instagram post on Tuesday insisting that feathers have no place at festivals such as Burning Man.
People have no place at Burning Man. It's inhospitable for human habitation.
It is in the middle of a desert, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, how privileged do you have to be to have this as your problem? I saw some people wearing feathers at a music festival and it offended me. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And here's an article from Wired, a glimpse of a future without white people.
Oh, okay.
Not quite as genocidal as it might seem. It's talking about a
right.
book. It starts with, whiteness is a seduction. Whiteness is also an illusion. These are the twin motifs on which Pakistani writer Mohsin Hamid props up The Last White Man, which is his book.
This was covered in a weekend segment fairly recently, wasn't it? Yes.
So yeah, I'm not going to go over it too much, but yes, this is being touted. Loads of media outlets talking about it because they like the concept of the last white man. I mean, it's resonating with a lot of people, isn't it?
Well, it reminds me of when Jimmy Fallon came out and said that by X year, white people will be a minority in the USA to census data, and his audience clapped, and even he went, okay, it's a weird thing to applaud for. And I'm sure it's just because the applause sign went on, but at the same time, it seems to be a lot of people very happy that that if it were any other demographic, it would be called, institutional genocide or something like that. But
Let's have a look at what the end goal of this rhetoric is going to ultimately culminate in, and that is the state of South Africa.
Yeah.
So, this article is titled, White People Will Be the First Target. South Africa's Julius Malema warns of impending violence because the poor are getting poorer. So, when people are going to be not very well off, I suppose, it increases the likelihood that they're going to go out and do violent things. And of course, both in South Africa and seemingly in the West, these people are going to be white people because we are the scapegoats for everyone's suffering. And this is the real world implication of all of this online news cycle rhetoric, is that people are going to go out of their way to hurt people because they believe that they're being wronged. Obviously in South Africa, some of the people might have been culpable, but a lot of the time it's innocent people being murdered for no reason other than the colour of their skin. And this isn't exactly the world I want to live in, where people are targeted with violence because they are perceived as having some sort of racial indiscretion. That's horrifying, but this is what all of this kind of rhetoric is leading to.
if you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com and become a premium member on our website, where you get all sorts of exclusive content like this, Josh and Harry's deep dive into the psychology behind trans speciesism. If you'd like to find out all the content that Josh is putting out, you can follow him on Getter at @Josh_firm. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.